Thank you. Welcome everybody to today's meeting in the Cabinet. We're down by a few people who have got, we've got COVID, one looking after somebody with COVID, and one's on honeymoon. So we are down in numbers today. And a welcome to Edward, who is on work experience this week. And I hope it doesn't put you off forever when you see this. And we've got no opposition to fall out with today, so we'll try to behave ourselves. So apologies for absence. We've got those. I've said the reasons behind that. And to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 16th of June. So I'll move that. We agreed? We're agreed. Thank you. Declaration of interests. Non-declared. So for you, Edward, the declaration of interest, if we've got a personal interest, we'd have to declare it so it's, open there because there's voting taking place. Item 4, which is the forward plan. That's Emma's, I think. Thank you, Emma.
Nothing to add, so if there's any questions, let me know.
All right. Any comments? None. Just move those recommendations there. That's the Cabinet notes, the contents of the draft forward plan, making comments where appropriate. None received, so I'll move that. Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, which is food, health and housing manager. That's Sam. Obviously, Sam. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you. So you'll have a report in your packs on the selective licensing outcome of the phase 2 public consultation. So this report signs off 2 actions on the Gedling plan, or on the corporate service plan, for reporting on the findings to extend this selective licensing and to launch the new scheme. So the purpose of the report is to consider the results of the 12-week public consultation and then a further 4-week public consultation that was carried out between April and May this year. Also, the purpose is to approve a designation, approve the licence conditions, and to authorise the Director for Environment, Communities and Leisure to publish a notice of designation and to approve the licensing fees, to authorise a review in 18 months' time, and to note the financial implications. So the background of this report sets out in detail the case for selective licensing phase 2. And it's following on from a successful pilot in Netherfield, where we've been running the scheme since 2018. We've issued over 595 licences and inspected over 400 properties. During those inspections, we found 78% of properties had hazards below minimum legal standards, and 40 of those homes had imminent hazards that the tenants were living with that required immediate action to address, things like inadequate means of escape in the event of a fire and other sort of safety hazards that we found. So these were hazards that the tenants were living with, unaware sometimes of the risk in which they posed. We've also issued 7 civil penalties in Netherfield, totalling over 18,000 in fines, which is reinvested in the private housing service to improve the regulation and standards. So there is a legislative background to selective licensing set out in Section 80 of the Housing Act 2004. It's a discretionary power which local authorities can use where there are high concentrations of rented accommodation, that's over 19%, as set out in the Secretary of State's guidance, and where there are certain conditions arising, so where there are low housing demand, significant and persistent problems caused by antisocial behaviour, poor property conditions, high levels of migration, high levels of deprivation, or high levels of crime. So where one or more of those categories exist, the Council can introduce a selective licensing scheme, provided they are satisfied that the statutory grounds for making a scheme are met. The Council have taken reasonable steps to consult persons affected by the scheme. They ensure that the exercise of power is consistent with the overall housing strategy, some of which is set out in this report, and to seek and adopt a coordinated approach in connection with dealing with homelessness, empty properties and social behaviour. And the Council must not make a designation unless it's considered whether there are any other courses of action available that might provide an effective method of achieving the objective. Now, most of the methods that are available are informal. Selective licensing is the only scheme that requires the landlord to apply for the licence, and then allows the council to carry out a fit and proper assessment of the applicant, and then can carry out checks to verify that the property is compliant. So in October 2020, approval was granted for a 12-week consultation, and the findings are set out in the report. And then a further 4-week consultation was carried out earlier this year. It's fair to say this approach does split opinions. There are those in favour and those against. We had over 102 responses to the first consultation, which included 10 questions, and over 450 written comments were received. 62% of private landlords and 50% of letting agents who replied to the first consultation managed properties in the proposed areas. So conversely, 48% of landlords and 50% who replied didn't manage properties in the area, but still took the time to reply to the consultation. 80% of private rented tenants and 65% of owner-occupiers lived in the proposed areas. Overall, with the first consultation, 40% of private rented tenants and 60% of owner-occupiers agreed with the council's proposal to introduce a Phase 2 licensing scheme. However, 90% of landlords and 75% of agents disagreed. With the second consultation, there were 107 responses online, and overall 30% agreed with the council's proposal to introduce selective licensing, with 9% neither agreeing or disagreeing, and 65% disagreed. So within the consultation, there were a number of written comments that were received. There were some that were less supportive, comments like it's a tax on landlords, a paper exercise, will do little to tackle bad landlords, the costs will be passed on to the tenants who are already under pressure with the rising cost of living. Others had said, although it's a good idea, I believe this should be delayed as it's not the right time to put extra costs on landlords due to COVID. Conversely, there were positive comments where people commented that the scheme should cover Carlton Hill Ward as it reflects high levels of tenanted properties and therefore should prove effective in improving standards and health and safety for all residents in the area. In Newstead, there's a landlord who doesn't care who rents out the property, is only interested in the rent. Others commented they would like to see the scheme for all rented homes in the borough, not just selective areas. These schemes protect tenants from bad landlords and improve the standard of rented homes. There is a Facebook group that's been set up in Colac, which is called Say No to Selective Licensing. There are 10 members of the Facebook group. It's not generated significant media or community interest, and we believe representatives from that group did respond direct to the council in the consultation. So the detailed analysis of the responses are found in Appendices 3, 4 and 5 to this report. We also had direct response from Landlord Associations, MPO, ALA, Property Mark and Safe Agent. They predominantly commented on the timing, and this was with the first consultation with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, and the council listened to the concerns raised about the time of the consultation and delayed reaching a decision until now, when the vaccine rollout has been considered a success, restrictions have been removed and hospitalisations are below peak levels. We also received a response from Inspector Pearson from Nottinghamshire Police, who talked about the enhanced partnership working between Gedling Borough Council and the police and private landlords, and the scheme helps to improve safer communities, safeguard vulnerable people and reduce crime and antisocial behaviour. It enables a joined-up approach for tackling issues within the selected areas. So the details are set out in the report. Between the first consultation and the second, the council also carried out a generation rent private sector engagement project where we surveyed private rented tenants in Netherfield, Colac and Newstead between May and July 2021. There were 63 responses to the consultation, and of those tenants, they reported 49% of respondents said they had problems with damp or mould, 34% had dealt with leaks or drafts, 26% face problems with electrical or gas safety equipment, and 70% of respondents were unaware that the council can help them, with 85% never having contacted the council before about an issue related to their landlord, letting agent or home. So it's important to note that selective licensing does bring in a mandatory scheme in those areas where the council has the resource and can regulate the properties where applications are received, and also carry out enforcement if landlords don't apply or properties are found to be below standard. Next on the report is the proposal, which mirrors the purpose of the report. Alternative options, the council must have considered any other course of action that might bring about an effective method of achieving the objectives. As mentioned, most of these schemes are voluntary, whereas selective licensing becomes mandatory. The financial implications are set out in the report. There is a two-part fee to be paid, £585 for accredited landlords and £700 for non-accredited landlords. That's split over a two-part fee, and the resources required to deliver the scheme are set out in paragraphs 4.3 and 4.4, including the costs and the staff and resource that would be required. Should Cabinet approve this report, then the staffing implications will be implemented via a separate report to the Chief Executive to approve the establishment of the post in accordance with delegated authority. The legal implications are set out in Section 5. Cabinet must be satisfied that the statutory tests have been satisfied and that the Council has taken all reasonable steps to consult people likely to be affected by the designation. I think the overwhelming response that we had to the consultation, with over 200 responses, sort of proves that we've done a thorough job in terms of consulting the public. And the details are set out in Appendices 3 to 5. The qualities section and the qualities impact assessment is set out in Appendix 6. Private tenants will benefit from improved housing conditions. Selective licensing is a mechanism available to the council to legally require landlords to apply for a licence. It will have a positive impact on protected characteristics and groups from a qualities perspective, and will help improve living conditions to ensure best practice. Rogue landlords who take advantage of vulnerable tenants will either need to comply with their legal obligations or move out of the sector. The scheme also introduces a public register that can be used to target services and increases openness and transparency. Officers carrying out the role are often able to signpost to other services such as disabled facilities grants and schemes that will benefit tenants. In terms of carbon reductions set out in Section 7, the scheme does assess the full 29 hazards under the Housing Health and Safety Rating Scheme. The Council can take action in terms of excess code and improve the energy efficiency of homes, can also ensure that the landlords are complying with their minimum energy efficiency standards in the private rented sector, as well as in Netherfield we've currently got the local authority retrofit scheme, which is in operation, and it will be moving to Newstead Village later in the year. So in terms of the recommendations, these are to approve the designation of the Phase 2 selective licensing area, to approve the conditions, to authorise the Corporate Director of Environment, Communities and Leisure to publish a notice of designation, to approve the licence fees, to review the scheme in 18 months, and to note the financial and staffing implications. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sam. That's a thorough explanation there, and I don't think we have as much detailed debate as we did on the first one, because the first one seems to be, thanks to you and your team, a substantial success there. And reminding people who are looking at this, listening to this or whatever, we have a duty as a council, that's collectively across all political parties, duty of care to the residents that we actually serve. I don't personally have a problem with this. I'm hoping it will help us with another thorn in our side, and that's HMOs. And they're not all bad, but similar to all the landlords, there are not some excellent landlords in this borough, as we know. They've been in this cabinet, in this chamber, and have spoken to us. This is to catch those people, like everybody, trying to make or rather not provide the facilities they should do in 2022, and that should be safe. And you've only got to look back at the Grenfell and places like that, and I think there was another awful fire this week, and they're on the larger properties, but there are some smaller properties, and I have practical experience of that myself, having worked in construction, in electrical, plumbing, etc. And I've been to some really cagey places. The residents and people are in there because they're in fear of being thrown out. And I think this will strengthen the case. I think it will weed the ones out that are not doing the job properly, and it will keep safety. And at the end of the day, it's an invisible earning. I think this will save lives, and I think you yourself and your team again should be congratulated, because things that you've brought in particularly on gas and things like that. I mean, it's supposed to be tested every year, but there's supposed to be a plaque there in these places. I've gone into lots of these properties, and well, where's your gas certificate? Where's electric? And it's not there. So we really do need to to support this. But have you got any comments on it from other members?
Thank you, Leader. And just to echo what you've been saying, and just to say what an excellent piece of work, well done in terms of how comprehensive it's been. I thought the consultation was really interesting. Mixed views, but I thought you went to all areas to ensure that we really did consult with the community. So I thought that was really good in terms of that. And I just echo, the fact that what's been identified was some concerns around gas and electricity. To start with, knowing what we know in terms of the terrible tragedies that we've had, I think, that says it all for me. It's about ensuring our duty of care to people in our community, and not only in terms of thinking about the health and safety, but also public health. I mean, 49% of houses had damp and mould. We know that the impact of living in a damp environment in terms of people's health, so in terms of our duty of care around public health as well. So I just think, I understand the anxiety around tenants feeling that actually landlords are going to put this onto their rent, but ultimately it's about safety and care and care of our residents. So I'm absolutely 100% behind this. Thank you.
Thanks. For anybody else? No. Can I just ask Sam, if some people have only got one property and things like that, are we able to assist them to where they can get possible grants or help to improve those properties?
Yes, we do. I mean, part of the service we provide is tailored to support landlords and tenants. So when we're doing the inspections, we'll identify issues that arise and try and find solutions, try and problem solve. So as I mentioned, we've got the Retrofit scheme that's run down in Netherfield at the moment. We've linked that in with landlords, and the scheme will extend to Newstead Village this year. We have just recently signposted somebody for disabled facilities grants, so they could get their home adapted, and again to improve their health and mobility living in that property.
That's good, yeah, because that grant is sometimes, you look at the end of the year end and think, why hasn't all that been spent? And I think a lot is the publicity surrounding disability grants, etc. And that still comes from the county council, doesn't it? That grant comes via the county council. Yeah, thank you. Any further comment? If there's no further comment, I'll move it's already been read out. There's 6 recommendations. I'll move that. We're seconded and we're agreed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sam. Thank everyone. Right, we'll move on to item 6, which is here. And that's Mike.
I'll go over there.
After you, Mike. I'm going to get a bad...
See if this works. Yeah, looks as though it does. Okay, so thank you, Leader. So this report sets out the performance data for the council at both the end of Q4 and also the full financial year, which takes us up to the end of March 2022. So if I start with the Q4 figures first, looking at actions, there are 96 actions currently active in the multi-year Gedling plan, which ends next year in March 2023. At the end of Q4, we have completed 27 actions with the remaining 69, still a large number, but scheduled to be completed in the new year. So that is next year from in the year we're already in, and that ends in March 2023. At this stage, no problems with delivery on those outstanding actions are anticipated at this stage. In terms of performance indicators, there are 31 indicators. 12 were on target, 3 just slightly below target, and 7 did actually miss the target. The other 9 indicators were for tracking purposes only and explained in the report. The reasons for the 7 indicators that have missed the target are clearly set out in paragraph 2.5 in there, and in virtually all cases the underlying reason is the impact of COVID on our service delivery throughout last year. In terms of achievements, again in quarter 4, these are set out in detail in the appendix to the report, but are highlighted. Some of the positive performances are summarised in paragraph 2.7. So just to cover these quickly, the Community Heroes Award. This was an application for us for an award for the fantastic and amazing work we did at Richard Herrod's site on the humanitarian issues. We were shortlisted, but unfortunately we didn't win, but we were very, very close. So congratulations to the team on all that work. Agile working was a success, an incredible amount of work from the IT team. We had to purchase a lot of new laptops, and also had to convert some other laptops to make them suitable for agile working, and again, really successful in last year. The Gedling Access Road, massive project, facilitated by ourselves, the County Council and Keepmoat, and other partners as well. Really improved the area of Gedling, and it wouldn't have happened without the input of Gedling Borough Council. The Arnold Marketplace, I'm pleased to say, is very close to completion now. Everybody's seen the building work going up, and we're now due handover for completion in August, so we're very, very close on that. Really pleased to see the Carbon Management Strategy and Action Plan. This was approved by Cabinet in March, and it details over 100 actions, and we're now working as officers to try and develop and deliver on those actions to achieve our carbon management and climate change ambitions. We're happy to support the Great British Spring Clean and the Keep Britain Tidy event. We have some amazing community litter picking groups out there in the borough, and do a fantastic job, and we're happy to coordinate our efforts with those groups as well. Pleased to see the new swimming passport scheme. It was launched to reduce health inequalities. Again, a really successful uptake on that, and thanks to certainly the leisure team and of course portfolio holder Henry for pushing that through, and it is really positive. And really exciting on the audit of last year's accounts. So, we are in incredibly difficult times, and incredible result, unqualified audit opinion, and we had a healthy value for money conclusion as well. So we are bucking the trend, and it's thanks to the amazing work of the finance team and others. So first of all, can I place on record my thanks to all the staff involved in achieving these great targets and achievements. And I'll now move on to the year end, which is the presentation. So, right, it's on the screen. So just in terms of year-end figures, in addition to the performance indicators we've just mentioned, which are monitored on a quarterly basis, there are a number of indicators that are also reported on an annual-only basis. So in total, in last year, there were 47 indicators for the year. 22 were either on target or slightly behind target, which we have no concerns about. 11 were behind target, again, as in the report. 12 were tracking only targets, and 2 had no data available. Full details of these are in the next report on the agenda in the annual report, but I'll just go through the summary of this now, which is on the screen. So, first of all, overall, how do we know how well we're doing? Well, our feedback comes from a various number of sources, including customer satisfaction, comments and feedback, performance targets, the actions and indicators as monitored in the report, customer complaints and compliments. We also have a lot of casework in there through members and the MPs. I've forgotten the thing, haven't I? Yeah. Benchmarking, and of course value for money financial appraisal of individual services. And thank you for my lovely assistant for bringing that to me. Thank you. Oh, it's moved anyway, it's magic. So first of all, our response to the pandemic during 21-22. Again, we supported the coordination of testing sites in the borough, primarily at Richard Herrod, Lamley Lane and Druids Car Park as well. They were 3 sites we supported, along with the CCG, and were very successful there. The Gedling COVID-19 Recovery Fund was launched, again to support local community organisations, and that helped a number of our most vulnerable residents in the borough. IMT, the incident management team, we were very successful in coordinating the approach. You know, it's treated as an emergency planning issue. We went through the entire COVID working on this, you know, trying to deliver that, and again, I think it was quite smooth. It was stressful at the time, and it still is, but we got there, and I think we couldn't have done much more for our community in the response and the recovery for the COVID pandemic. Really good news, we delivered over 150,000 vaccinations in our Richard Herod Centre. Amazing number, and I'm sure that's kept people fit and well and healthy throughout the period. We also got money from the government through the Contain Outbreak funding, and again that's helped us to provide a number of services and also you know, catch up on areas we've missed out on as we reprioritised service areas to deliver on COVID. And that money has been really helpful in not only recovering where we were, but other key initiatives as well. And the really good big news is we have continued distribution of the business support grants. Amazing figure of over £31 million we've delivered through our finance and wider customer services teams. And yet another COVID scheme there was the CARF, the COVID Additional Relief Fund, and another 1.2 million has been successfully allocated to businesses in April. So that is our response to the pandemic. And it's not moving now. So it's worthwhile looking at performance indicators in each of our 5 Gedling Plan priority areas. So the first one is cohesive, diverse and safe communities. 48 fixed penalty notices were served for litter and dog fouling. This is a big increase on previous years, and we have ambitions to increase that further this year. Over £1 million, I think it's something like 1.2 million, was spent on disabled facilities grants, which have enabled disabled adaptations for residents with disabilities and enabling them to remain living independently in their own homes. Again, coordinated effort across the borough, but equally it works with other districts and boroughs across Nottinghamshire as well. And we're trying to streamline that approach even more, working with the occupational therapists and things, people like that from the county council to you know, really improve that service and increase value for money if we can in the new year. Despite the difficulties, we've still managed to process new housing benefit claims quicker than our target. So on average 13.5 days against a target of 15 days. You know, bearing in mind a lot of the housing benefit team were redrafted into working in addressing the COVID and working on the business grants. An amazing result, and long may that continue in the new year. Burlington Theater was successful. It was closed during COVID, it reopened, and since then we've seen over 28,000 visits. Again, really, really good. Bearing in mind we had to leave a seat space between every seat in the cinema. I think that's an incredible figure. And sort of linked to the environment, but it comes under this area, which is 99.2% of fly tipping incidents were removed very quickly, I think, in 4 working days. So that's good. Now I should say, next slide, please, shouldn't I, like a famous person? Because this isn't working. No. So next priority, high-performing council. This is the inward-looking one. Our contact centre continues to work incredibly well with 94.4% of calls answered or a callback made within the target. Rob's here, isn't he, in the communications team? Successfully now, we've got 44,000 Keep Me Posted email newsletter subscribers. An amazing figure considering we only have 118,000 residents, so incredible and well done to the team there. Again, probably unprecedented, almost 3,000 of our residents responded to our biennial resident survey. Bearing in mind, most surveys across the country, the average is 300, 400, 500. This is an incredible result with 3,000. And I think it reflects our methods of inclusivity, of using not only paper copies, but online as well. And you can see the success in that. And of course, hard times, cost of living increases and everything else, but we still managed to successfully collect over 98% of council tax. In terms of vibrant economy, 37 affordable homes were delivered against a target of 20, so have exceeded that target. Again, this is really positive. I'm looking forward to the vast amount of building in the borough going on at the moment. This can only increase in the new year. Amazing result in that 81 long-term empty homes were returned to use. And that's as a result of our intervention. We have one excellent officer who works on this and really, coming into her own here and bringing those back. And again, the planning team, 100% of all major applications for planning were progressed within the target of 13 weeks. We set quite a tough target of 90%, but we've surpassed that and done every one. So again, big congratulations to the team there. Turn to sustainable environment, to get my teeth in. So, huge ambitions to plant as many trees as possible. I think 1,700 is a really good figure for 1 year, but we can do more and we will do more in the current year. So, but in last year, 1,700 trees were planted. Amazing. And street cleaning is clearly a key issue for the residents out there, and we're pleased to report that over 98% of our streets surveyed had acceptable levels of litter. Both myself and Eugene would say any litter is unacceptable, and we're working towards that. But I think the PI there is, achieved as we see it. In terms of healthy lifestyles, since the leisure centres reopened after COVID, the Learn to Swim scheme has really grown. Again, gone from 2,400 members pre-COVID and unprecedented numbers. I don't think we've ever had as many swimming lessons as this. We're now up to 3,500. We've been working with a company called Big Wave, who have really encouraged that. And again, it's to the benefit of our residents that we can do that. Back to newsletters. The Health and Wellbeing e-newsletters have been circulated to over 6,000 recipients. And this is where we can't send them to people who don't subscribe. You'll have to opt into that. So an incredible result getting 6,000 people doing that. Again, Henry and his team, the Armed Forces Leisure Card Scheme, we've now got 279 registered Gedling residents using that, which gives them discounts and free swims, I think, in certain times of the day at our leisure centres swimming pools, and it's really good to see that, and the council is very prolific in supporting the Armed Forces in this borough. Sam's just been on. Food premises, 96% of food premises scored either 4 or 5 in the National Food Hygiene Rated Scheme. Good result, and we're not resting there. We are looking at the remaining 4% as well to see what improvements and enhancements we can do to that service to improve it. And again, we used to be over 1 million in leisure centres, and we celebrated that. That was pre-COVID. Even after that, we've now got over 800,000 visits to our leisure centres. So incredible, we've done well to attract people back after the pandemic. So, of course, there are main areas of concern. There's 4 listed here are the biggest, I wouldn't say worries, but things we need to look at as officers and members. So the first one is the average length of time spent in temporary accommodation. We've done a lot of work in this area. Council approved the budget to purchase 8 new properties for temporary accommodation last year. So far, we've purchased 6 of the 8, and we're looking to try and complete the last 2. That has alleviated some of the pressures, but at the moment in last year, the performance was 24.3 weeks against an annual target of 22. Part of the problem, which was a good problem, was that during the pandemic, the government expected to help out the sleeping, the rough sleeping and the homeless, and there was an initiative called Everyone In campaign. That meant all councils had to proactively work with every person who wanted it to find them accommodation. Impact of that is we find them in temporary accommodation, so they do have a roof over their head, but it does affect this performance indicator. So I think it's just missed the target, and bearing in mind everything else, I think it's quite a good result. The team have also continued to support extremely vulnerable clients, as well as supporting several large families. Now, we do have a shortage of large family properties in the area, so it does cause us significant difficulties in trying to find those, meaning that these larger families have to be housed in temporary accommodation until we can resolve that issue. The private sector, finding housing in the private renting sector continues to be a challenge. The rent levels by far exceed the local housing allowance, so there's an anomaly there. You could get a house in the private sector, but within 2 weeks you probably wouldn't be able to afford the rent. So, we don't believe in putting people in houses they cannot afford to continue in, which is, again, one of the problems we're trying to address locally. And the number of affordable houses being built in the area will only go to improve that. So that is a concern, temporary accommodation, but I think we're doing a lot of initiatives there to try and resolve that situation. The next one, we've already mentioned a good performance on housing benefit overall for new claims. There's a slight drop in performance in the changing circumstances, but there were a number of factors that contributed to this in last year. The abolition of the £20 universal credit that we all know about, that was a top-up that was abolished in, I think, October last year. That caused a huge increase in caseload in terms of universal credit changing circumstances. All that work came through almost on top of each other, and it caused a bit of backlog in the teams dealing with change of circumstances, which is reflected in the performance, which was 5.3 days against the target of 4 days. Of course, we have continued to prioritise new claims because they're the most important. We need to get the money to new people who need it out there straight away. So these changes have slightly suffered, but I still think it's acceptable. The team have also delivered the test and trace scheme within the existing resources. So I think the upward trend is that things are improving and they'll continue to improve and get back to normal levels in the current year. So net additional homes provided. Current performance last year was 357 net additional homes against a target of 458. Again, I've already mentioned the prolific building that's going on in our borough, and I think that will start to turn that around pretty quick now. We do have an action plan that looks at the planning policy context, and it provides an analysis of past housing delivery and identifies a number of key actions which aim to improve that housing delivery as well. Some of those actions fall to the remit of the council, and others need to be supported by other stakeholders, including the developers and the landowners as well. Some good news, the number of additional homes provided in Q4 that's just ended was only 3 below the target, so you can see now I think that things are improving, and I have no concerns over this target. We will get there again. The last one, excuse me, is percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting. Something we need to address. We've seen that. We've seen that in some of the complaints we receive. And we are looking to try and improve this. We're investing in a new system. We're looking at working protocols, the way we process things, and trying just to refresh the service and improve the way we operate in that area. It is a key area for our residents. So the positive trends are indeed improving. So if I look at March alone, so the March just gone, in terms of recycling, we achieved 41.15% of recycling against a target of 36%. So you can see if we can continue that trend that we achieved in March, then things are looking more positive, but there is always more work to do in this area. And through the comms, we continue to push for a marked increase in recycling. We have a media campaign to promote recycling via our website, social media, and we also advertise on our refuse vehicles. We send a bin calendar out to all households. We have a leafleting service sometimes when we remind people to, don't park on the road when there's a collection due, and that helps to address some of the missed bin issues. And finally, we have a bin reminder email service as well. So all these things help the resident not only to know when the collections are, but to help us help them as well. So that needs a bit more work, and we admit that, but it's something, again, we're looking to improve and put in a significant amount of resource to in the current year. So just moving on to an analysis of MPs' letters, compliments, complaints. So the number of MPs' letters is fairly stagnant over the last 7-8 years. Last year we had 173 MP letters, which more or less duplicate complaints. So when a resident complains, they also seem to send a copy to the local MP, and then he forwards that on to us as well. So we try not to duplicate the work, and the same response can go to both the MP and the resident at the same time. But they're fairly consistent. Compliments continue. It's very good that we record these. So in last year we had 234 compliments, which is really good to see, especially in the dark times we've been through. And the number of complaints, quite high, 505 again in last year. A lot are to do with what I've just said, the waste service, and we are looking to proactively improve that. So that's where we are, and I think I'll sit down now, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. You've got to have a cup of tea now, aren't you, after that? It is thanks to all the people that's involved in that. It was very positive. There are areas there which are, clear, crystal clear, that we need to improve on. And I've just wondered how we get this out, that sort of report you've given in this, not sanitised, what's the other word? We need to put it together so people can actually, perhaps you'll help with that on comms, Rob, to get it. So, because there's some good news there, and there's also that straight, honest, where we have got it wrong, and we need to do it. But it's also, I think, we need to thank all the people that have been involved with it, and also stress that it's not just Gedling Borough Council, it is our partners as well, and that includes the government, because the government have fed us money, and hopefully that we've spent that in a wise and proper way, along with working with the County Council, Health, Police and everybody else that helps deliver such a positive report. So anybody got any questions? Viv?
Again, just to echo, Leader, what you've said, Mike, it was really heartwarming to hear what was being said. A big thank you to everybody. It's been a really difficult time, and the achievements that we've done during this difficult time is just brilliant. Big thank you to Alison, of course, because Queen of Finance is brilliant. a very difficult time, so well done. But well done to all officers. I mean, I was just... The partnership working, I think you said that, Leader, but the partnership working, as Gedling Borough, we work really well with our partners, and we can't do this on our own. It's really important that we enhance and develop those relationships, and I think we've got a really good turn there. And I just think it's just some of the things that, 99% of fly tipping within, a few days is brilliant, because there's nothing worse. I mean, we want to get to the root cause of fly tipping. That's the issue, but actually, there's nothing worse than driving along and seeing piles of rubbish down by the side. So that's brilliant. Swimming lessons up, again, health and wellbeing, saving lives actually for children, young people and adults that can learn to swim. It makes a big difference. And I'm really heartened to hear about the Burlington Theater, because it's a great asset that we have our own cinema, our own theatre within the borough. And again, I think that's brilliant. And another big thank you to the Empty Homes officer, who's brilliant. I mean, again, what was that? 81 homes brought back in? Fabulous. So I know we've got work to do, but I'd just like to say, on behalf of one of the Cabinet members, well done to everybody in this really difficult time. So thank you.
Thanks, Viv. Ron?
Thanks, Chair. Without repeating what Viv has already said, just a massive thank you to the team, Mike's team, and all the hard work, particularly during the COVID years, which now we're sort of getting into the third year, and we've still got a little spike coming, but just anecdotally, knocking on doors, as we sometimes do as councillors, we get very positive responses from the residents in Gedling, who like living in Gedling for all the reasons you've just described. So well done to the team. Excellent. Well done.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else. So the recommendation is there that progress against improvement actions and performance indicators for Q4, full year of 2021/22, Gedling plan, and we're asked to note that. We agreed? Thank you. I'm still on with Mike now.
Thank you, Leader. This will be very quick because I've just covered a lot of this in the last one. So this is the third occasion on which an annual report has been produced. I think it's absolutely vital that we do this to sell all the, the positivity around the council that we do in difficult circumstances. Hence why we've got this summarised annual report here today. 11 pages, I think, of really useful information and a good summary for everyone to see what impact Gedling Borough Council does have with very limited resources. So this is the third year we've done this, and the aim is to really celebrate of what has been achieved over the last year. Again, the annual report includes specific reference to our work in COVID. Again, been through that already, as well as the service-based successes that we have enjoyed during the year. And just to say, Leader, once it's been approved, if it's approved today, then Rob and the comms team will publish this on our website, Contacts Magazine, and through social media as well. So I'll leave it there, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, another positive piece of work. Gedling Plan is there. It will be up on the website and people can peruse it at their level. It's something to read while you're having a glass of wine or a cup of tea. And if there are any queries there, then welcome the constructive comments, that is, that come back to us over the annual report for 21-22. So we're asked, anyone to comment on that? No further comment on that. It's recommended that Cabinet approve the proposed annual report 2021-22 for a wide publication internally and externally, as described within the report. I'll move that. Second, agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 8 now, which I can't find the recommendation for, but I think that's Paul. I've got the paper. Tell me where the recommendation is from. Thank you. Sorry, we're on 9.1. Yeah, anyway. Paul.
Right, thank you, Leader. Yes, this is the annual Treasury activity report for 21-22. And just to reassure members, every time I present one of these, I always say to members, don't be too worried about some of the jargon in this. Treasury management in this context is purely just relates to the council's investments and our borrowing and how we manage those. As you can imagine, it's an area that's heavily regulated, and there are 3 reports we're required by statute to bring before members every year. The first of these is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. It comes to Cabinet in February each year in advance of the new financial year, and basically sets out the parameters within which we are required to conduct our Treasury management. Again, that's set by members here at Cabinet and then referred on to Council. The second report we're required to do each year is a mid-year review. We normally bring that to Cabinet sort of October, November time. Not only do we do that, we also present this to Cabinet on a quarterly basis as well. So in terms of reviewing our activity during the year in terms of monitoring, we do more than we're required to by the legislation. The third report we're required to bring to members each year is the Treasury Management Outturn Report. And this is that report for 21-22. So in terms of the report itself, it starts off with just a bit of a commentary really about the wider economic position. As members be aware, as we ended 21-22, that's when the cost of living crisis really started to kind of kick in. Where the escalating prices, the issue with Ukraine, and what's happened in the last 5 Monetary Policy Committee meetings, they've raised interest rates at every meeting, and that looks like it's going to continue. In terms of the rising interest rates, that doesn't affect the Council's borrowings in the short term. All our borrowings are at fixed interest rates, but it will affect us kind of going forward as and when we need to undertake some new borrowing or when any of our existing loans mature and need to be replaced. This Council, like all local authorities, we can only borrow to finance capital expenditure. We can't borrow for revenue purposes. And again, our need to borrow is measured by something called a capital financing requirement. And that at 31st of March 2022 was 11.6 million. Our actual borrowing levels were 10.8 million. So in effect, we were what we call under-borrowed at the year-end date. That's probably a better position to be in than over-borrowed. What that simply means is we're using some of our available balances for investment, our cash reserves, to finance capital expenditure. In terms of what happened during the last 12 months, in terms of our borrowing, we took out 1 new loan during the course of the year. We borrowed £1 million from the Public Works Loans Board, which is a primary government agency. And we borrowed that for 50 years at 1.81%. An equivalent loan today would be in excess of 2%. So we probably, timing-wise, we probably did well there in terms of taking that loan out. In terms of kind of our investments, what we do as an authority, any kind of money's coming into the council on a daily basis through people paying council tax, various fees and charges and such like. And of course, we're paying money out. We're paying our creditors. We're passing precepts over to the likes of the county, the police and the fire, the parishes, and we're also paying our salaries. So we have inflows and outflows on a daily basis. But what we do with any surplus cash balances, we look to invest them, see if we can make a return. In terms of our investments, again, we have to follow a hierarchy. We can't just go chasing the best possible return. There's a hierarchy we have to follow: security, liquidity, yield. What that simply means is when we are investing money, security has to be our number one consideration. The institution that we're going to place the money, how secure is it? Again, that's all defined in the strategy that members set at the start of the year. The second factor we have to consider is liquidity. So that simply means if we're investing our money, how quickly can we get it back if we need to pay anybody? It's no good us also investing money at long term and then needing it on a short-term basis and having to break those agreements. So we manage that process through careful cash flow management, making sure we've always got money coming in to meet our outflows as they fall due. And the third requirement is yield. That's the return that we get on our investments. I say that is third and at the bottom of the list of considerations. Security, liquidity always come up at the top. And again with yield, as you can imagine, that's all linked to risk. It's risk and reward. You might see a high return being offered, but again, that means more risk. So they're kind of the three factors we always have to consider. So in terms of our investments, most of our investments are with money market funds. They're AAA rated, highly diverse, very liquid, so we can get our money back on almost same day or next day basis. That's who we have most of our investments with. We have one long-term investment, that's an investment in excess of 12 months. A couple of years ago, we took out an investment, £1 million investment with a property fund. And those are intended to be more long-term. You put your money in and you leave it for a couple of years and then see how it's, hopefully there'll be capital appreciation and a dividend as well that will benefit us. When you make an investment in a property fund, almost initially your money goes down because the people that's managing it on our behalf have to invest that. But we're in a positive position now. We can report now that in 21-22, our position on that investment has appreciated. We're now in positive territory now. It was worth more at 31st of March than the £1 million we invested. Plus, as well, in addition, we've had dividends from that in recent years as well, which have served as well as an authority. In terms of the appendices for the report, Appendix 1, just a summary of our investments and our loans at 1st of April 2021 and 31st of March 2022. You'll see there the borrowing of £10.8 million at 31st of March. And you'll see that our investments as well at the end of the year, which totaled £27.59 million. Appendix 2 shows what we call our prudential indicators. At the start of each year, we set those prudential indicators. They're approved by members at the beginning of each year, and they set limits within which the council's borrowing activity has to be undertaken. We have to demonstrate that any borrowing that we undertake is prudent and that we've got money available to meet our interest and principal liabilities as they fall due. Again, we also have set what we call our authorised and operational borrowing limits. Again, they're set by members, and I can report at this meeting that Section 151 Alison kind of complied with those in full during the course of the year 21-22. That's all I've got to say about the report itself, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Questions? No? Everybody's baffled by figures, Paul.
Don't be daunted by the jargon, no.
Yeah, it is positive, without a doubt. It'll soon be...
Oh, thank you.
The alarm bells will soon be ringing if we got this wrong.
Sorry, Leader. The point I would emphasise to members as well, as I say, the strategy is always set by members at the start of the year. As officers, we have to comply with that. They're the parameters we have to do on a daily basis. Again, it's a highly regulated area, and we can report that Alison's the 151. We've complied with all the indicators and requirements in full for the course of the year.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
So if there's no further comments, then I'll move the recommendation that members approve the annual Treasury Activity Report 2021-22 and refer it to the full council for approval as required by the regulations. So that will turn up next Wednesday, will it?
Yes.
Right, yeah. Okay, are we agreed? Agreed, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Pass that back there. Right, so, Alison's preaching today. Right, over to you, Alison. Item, where are we? 9. Thank you. Budget outturn and the budget carry forwards. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, just pulled a few slides together for today just to present this report. So it is on page 211 of the pack, presents our revenue and capital budget outturn and carry forwards for 21-22. Next slide, please, if anybody. You've gone, yeah, that's the one, yeah. So we'll just start, first of all, with the headline position on our revenue budget. So as detailed in paragraph 2 of the report, including the impacts of the outturn of each of our portfolios on the use of our general fund balance. The table on page 214 shows an increase in the use of our balances of £160,000 compared to that estimated However, that's largely due to the timing of the receipt of the COVID Additional Relief Fund grant for business rates that sits within our financing budgets. But that will now be accounted for in 22-23, and it will be used to fully offset the expected costs in the following year. So that will remain a neutral impact on our balances in the medium-term plan, as originally expected. So no overall impact in respect of that. So if we remove the impact of the COVID Additional Relief Fund grant, the underlying position for us is a positive one, with a net underspend on the net council budget of £318,000. That's offset very slightly by a minor reduction in retained business rates of £2,000, meaning that we have a lower contribution from balances of £316,000 for last year, which does mean that those funds remain available for us to support future expenditure plans and to mitigate any emerging risks in the medium-term plan. So that is a positive position for us. So our general fund balance at the end of the year is £4.6 million and remains above the minimum of £1 million that we set each year. But it should be noted that actually £2 million of that is required to fund the COVID-related exceptional deficit that we reported last year, which actually will be paid in 22-23. So £2 million of that isn't actually available to support future expenditure plans. So next slide, please. Oops, I've gone too far. Okay, so, sorry, that's, I seem to have lost a slide. So, in terms of the analysis of our reasons for our underspend on the net council budget, a full and net analysis of our outturn variances are actually included in Appendix 1 for your review, but the major variances are summarised in the report, and the headlines, therefore, those that are above £50,000, due to underspend on employees' expenses, 271,000, and a small underspend on premises expenses, and additional income of £389,000. That's primarily from leisure. That's Mike's already mentioned the success of the Big Wave programme, and also some pent-up demand following COVID for swimming lessons has also helped with that. Also within that is some additional income through garden waste customers, and also some additional recycling credits as well. And there's a couple more detailed items in the report for you as well. Oh, just before we move on, so what the note at the bottom there is, so as a result of that underspend, what that does is give us the opportunity to transfer some money into reserves to mitigate the emerging pressures that we face, the inflationary pressures due to the cost of living and the economic downturn. So that is proposed within the report, that we do transfer some of that underspend into reserves to mitigate those pressures in 22-23. So yeah, next slide please. Yeah, thank you. So moving on now to movement on earmark reserves. So these are proposed for approval, and they detailed in paragraph 2.4 of the report. You can see that we are taking 1.35 million less from reserves than we initially budgeted, which leaves us with £6 million of earmark reserves to carry forward. That positive variance of 1.35 million is due for a number of reasons, but primarily we've got some new contributions to reserves of 1.1 million. They're arising from some new specific grants that we've received and some additional income. Notably, there's the contribution of 233,000 from the business rates pool, which we will be setting aside for economic regeneration projects as required by that fund. We do have some increases in reserves also proposed to support future projects, and some COVID backlog work, so they come from related service underspends that we've achieved, and that does include the inflationary pressures reserve that I've just mentioned, but we're also proposing some transfers to the Transformation Fund and Asset Management Fund to help manage the delivery of our efficiency programme, which we've still got ongoing, and to mitigate some risks in the areas of our asset management. Then we also have some variances in our planned use of reserves at £220,000. That's mainly for some additional projects coming on stream during the year. Some of that is our hardship relief for council tax. We've drawn some money out of reserves for that, so there were specific grants. But that's also been offset by some reduced requirements for projects that we were planning to do that have been delayed due to COVID. So next slide, please. Turning now to provisions. So these are set out in page 224, and we are proposing these to Cabinet for approval as well. So these are amounts that we have to set aside for future liabilities that are likely to require settlement, but the timing of that settlement and the amount of it remains uncertain. And these are mainly related to potential business rates appeals, but also bad debts provisions. So the total proposed increase for this year is £337,000, and the majority of that is due to business rates appeals, with the total provisions that we have now proposed 4.6 million altogether, the total of that slide there. So next slide, please. So this is just a really high-level summary of our COVID budgetary impacts. You're all fully aware of the financial impact of COVID has had on the council. It's been very significant for us. And over the 2 years, the amount of costs that we face that have not been covered by government grant actually amounted to £1.1 million. That's had to be funded from our general fund balance. So that's mostly due to reduced income in both the general fund and the collection fund. But the impacts of that are now diminishing, and we're no longer budgeting for direct COVID impacts. As detailed in the report and in the Q4 performance plan report, our COVID response work did continue throughout the year, and we did continue to administer business grants and test and trace grants. So we paid out over £3 million for those. And we had another round of council tax hardship relief for our vulnerable households, which I've just mentioned. So next slide, please. Yeah, just briefly our efficiency programme. For last year, our approved efficiency programme for delivery was £905,000. We managed to deliver £642,000, which during that COVID year is probably a good result for us. We have £264,000, which is mainly deferrals into next year, so we are still working to deliver those. That's mainly some expected income collection and some service reviews that are still yet to be completed. We do now still have a programme of £1.3 million remaining to deliver over the next 3 years. But as I say, generally the programme is progressing well, and we do, as you know, through the quarterly monitoring, we do keep close monitoring of these plans, just to ensure that that if we do pick any up that are non-deliverable during the period, that we address that and we deal with any shortfall in the budget process, and we'll be doing the same on that this year. So nearly there. Yep, capital outturn. So in terms of capital, we've got £3.2 million underspend against the current approved budget of £9.5 million, and £3.1 million of that is now proposed for carry forward. The full list of schemes is detailed in Appendix 6 of the report. Of that, £1.57 million has been approved by myself as Chief Financial Officer in the line with our delegation arrangement, so they're all committed schemes. And we've got £1.49 million of non-committed schemes, which are now proposed for Cabinet approval in accordance with financial regulations. So the large items to be aware of there are disabled facilities grants. We've got the temporary accommodation project that Mike has referenced. We've also got the green homes grants still to be completed. And we've also got King George V public toilets and Lamley Lane changing rooms as well to be completed next year. So the proposed financing of the capital programme, detailed in paragraph 3.4, includes a mixture of capital receipts, grants and contributions, and we also have borrowing financing the programme of 2.2 million. And that is proposed for approval for referral to council, along with the required determinations that we're required to make for minimum revenue provision for the repayment of debt, which is £573,000. And so in this report, we do now propose that that is referred to council for approval as well. So just to summarise, I think just given the extent of the financial challenges that the council has faced, I think this does present a robust outturn position for us, increasing our general fund balance and our earmarked reserves, which should help us to support the future expenditure plans and help us to mitigate any risks that we see emerging during this coming year. So I'll leave it there, Leader. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Alison.
I'll park myself.
Everyone's stunned. Stunned.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd like to just say Alison and the team and Mike, a massive thank you for keeping us afloat and sound in a really difficult time. You know, I think that your expertise and your clear advice and guidance is really, really helpful to us, and it's proven to be really effective. So, yeah, massive thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I may just say that it is a whole team effort. So it's the whole of the finance team put a huge amount of work into this, but not only that, everybody within the council is responsible for managing their own budgets, and the success of the outturn position is down to everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else? Now, I've said it before and I said it again, you can only deliver these budgets with lots of councils, and I've said it in many places, different parts of the country, that we can only deliver these with the goodwill of the staff that we employ, because they're a very small, people don't recognise that. I think we're a great organisation, in comparison sometimes with the international ones, but to keep all this lot, to keep us in the black, if you like, it takes some doing, and that's a congratulations not only to you, your team, but it is all the managers that run all the way through and think before you spend. I think is one of the key things. Think before you spend. A bit like at home. Trouble is now, a lot of people don't do that, and unfortunately they get pushed into difficult situations. We are asked to do the recommendations, which are 5 recommendations on there, and it's noting the budget figures, outturn figures for 21-22, approve the movements in the earmarked reserves and provisions as detailed in paragraphs which was 2 to 4 and 2 to 5 respectively. Note the capital carry forwards approved by the Chief Financial Officer, including Appendix 6 being amounts not in excess of £50,000 and committed schemes above £50,000. Approve the capital carry forwards of £1,494,300, including Appendix 6 for non-committed schemes in excess of £50,000, and refer to the Council for approval. The overall method of financing of the 21-22 capital expenditure set out in paragraph 3.4. Determination of the minimum revenue provision for the repayment of debt as set out in paragraph 3.5. I'll move those. Seconded. Thank you. We are agreed. That's the end of that, and there are no, if I look at my list, there are no further items, so I'll close the meeting. Thank you.